So my name is John Dewsnap, director of Flexcar, director of engineering of Flexcar, not the whole director of Flexcar, someday. So my talk, 365 days later, but I think, kind of with this whole past, present, and future vibe that we have the conference this year, I actually lied. It's more like 500 days later, because I'm going to start a little bit before we launched last year. Not everybody was here, not everybody knows our story, so I'm going to fix that. So our backstory. So when I first joined Flexcar about 2003, we were a Java backend with not 70, 80 microservices. Thank you very much. And it was total chaos. And obviously it didn't start out this way. It grew over time, about not that long. You'd probably think like a 5 or 10 year journey. It was more like a year and a half, 2 years. And we got in this state where we had all of this. And we thought things were going along okay. I just joined, get my feet wet. Things were moving. I thought things were okay. And what happened, right? So how did we get here? How do we move from Java to Ruby on Rails? So we were working on a project, and we were changing how Flexcar, presented inventory to our customers. And you'd think, how hard can that be, right? So with 80 microservices, we sell cars, right? We sell, leases on cars. So you want to see a picture of the car, information about the car, what color it is, et cetera, et cetera. Each of those was a separate service. So when we asked to, and before Flexcar, how it used to work, we would show a picture of a Toyota Camry, right? And it represented the 1 to 100 or so Toyota Camrys we had on site. But we didn't show you all those cars. We just showed you a picture of a Toyota Camry. We were changing that to show every Toyota Camry we had on site. So instead of showing, like, say, 12 tiles, hundreds of tiles of cars, right? So we wanted, sub 500 millisecond response time. We asked for all this information we were going to put on the site, and the answer we got back from the many stakeholders for those microservices was no, we can't give that to you. So one of my engineers here, Dan Dunkers, built this caching layer. Yeah, props to Dan. I don't think this is the nail in the coffin, Dan, don't worry. He built this thing in about 3 weeks, and it was a whole caching layer just to get this data that we should have had on hand, right? Our CTO at the time, Mr. Freedom Dumlow, I'm sure a lot of you guys know him, made the decision, I think, and you can correct me after this if I'm wrong, but I think because the fact we had to build this caching layer to get core data for our service to our website so people could actually come and get our cars, made him think we got to do something different, right? I was not involved in this decision. I will say that. This was Mr. Freedom and his thoughts and his working. But he looked at a few things. Sweet. Django, Next.js, Svelte, what else? Elixir, and of course Ruby on Rails, right? And he decided, the one I want to go with is Ruby on Rails. Hence, otherwise I wouldn't be here, right? So Freedom brought us all into a room, sat us down as an engineering group and said, I have an announcement. We're going to switch from Java and all these microservices to a Ruby on Rails monolith. And we just went ecstatic. It was, wait a minute, that doesn't sound exactly right. No, that's not right at all. We were all pretty livid. Possibly myself included. I believe my quote was, I'm sure you guys will love this. I think my quote was 2005 called and wants its technology back. I hadn't heard about Ruby on Rails for quite a while at that point. And Freedom took it all in and decided, and rightfully so, that he was correct and we were going to go ahead with this anyway. And so we did. We had a target of rebuilding our whole entire, for the most part, let's say 90% of our platform in 3 months. Pretty aggressive timeline, I would argue, and trust me, that was mumbled throughout engineering for quite a while. And so we started, and we grabbed 4 core engineers. Again, Mr. Dan Dunkers was one of those 4 core engineers. 4 engineers built, I would say, a good 80% of what we have in Ruby on Rails, right? Got us stood up. And we didn't do it in 3 months. We failed. We did it in 4. Now notice I said we were planning on doing it in 3 months. That was a month before RailsConf last year, and we missed that mark. And so we pushed it out, a month. I don't think we looked at the dates because the day we were going to release landed on right in the middle of RailsConf last year. We had, I think, an eject button. If we didn't think things were going to go right, we could have pushed it out a week. No one would have been the wiser, or so I thought. And so we attended the, last year was my first RailsConf. It's a little bizarre that I'm up here now speaking to you all after, last year. By the way, Nadia's talk, opening keynote last year, ridiculously good. So a little bit of pressure on me. And then I attended the closing keynote that day by Irina, also ridiculously good. But the more important part of that was she talked about Flexcar and told our story and how we were going to do this migration and mentioned we were going to do it that night. So me and Freedom kind of looked at each other and was like, there goes our eject button. So we sat down and decided, okay, we're doing this thing. So we woke up that morning, attended first day of RailsConf, full day, went out, met people afterwards, and we kicked things off at about 11 p.m. So here's me and Freedom probably looking the happiest we were going to look during this migration. Trust me, it only gets better. And so it started about 11 p.m. We had to do a whole data migration, right? Because we had customers that have been with us since the beginning. We had to move all that data over, make sure that it was going to work. Even though we had done our testing and staging, because everything works flawlessly when you test it in staging and then go to prod. So we tested everything, and I think our original estimate was it was going to take 2-3 hours to do the data migration. This was me and Freedom, kind of in the middle of it. Notice 5 a.m., that's more than 2 or 3 hours. There was also some rumors at this time that snoring was heard over the Zoom call. I told Freedom, like I tell my wife and kids, I don't snore. No matter how many times you tell me this, it's impossible. So don't believe that rumor. It took us to about 3 o'clock the next day. We had already kind of launched by about 11 in the morning, I believe. Timeline kind of gets blurry. We were taking orders, and we just, things were actually looking okay. Obviously, there were some fires, but for the most part, we were feeling good, right? So Freedom, I think, tells me like about 5 o'clock, we got to get out of this hotel room. Our separate hotel rooms. We weren't in this one hotel room. As much as I love Freedom, that would have been, different. So we were, I was like, okay, that sounds good. Took a shower, changed, whatever, because we've been up for whatever. And we attended the happy hour at RailsConf. And I think I want to hit on what was talked about here, the community, and I think like all of you guys, and just the positivity that's felt. So when we got the announcement back, with the torches slide, one of the things that Freedom told me was, one of the reasons, I don't think it was like the main reason, but I think one of the important reasons was when we picked Ruby on Rails was the community and like how supportive everybody is and that. And I don't know, I kind of brushed it off. I was like, yeah, whatever, right? And then when we came, to RailsConf last year, and we went to this happy hour, it really struck me because of Irina's keynote. Not putting pressure on us. Everybody kind of knew our story. Everybody, knew we were trying to launch. So a lot of people came up to us and asked us, how did it go, right? And you could tell that people wanted to know. They cared. They were actually very interested and very, very supportive when we told them that, yes, we did go to production and, we got it done in 4 months, and people were like, oh, that's awesome. So the community here, is absolutely something special. I concur with that. It's not something that you find at a typical tech conference. It is something truly different, and it's something that I think should be cherished and appreciated. And so hence, I wanted to kind of highlight, we went to Rails, everything was a pretty special time. So, all right, so I think we can wrap it up. So we moved, everything was perfect, right? It's, happy ending and all, wait a minute, nope. So once we got back from RailsConf, reality kind of kicked in. And how'd the next 2 months go? I spent hours and hours trying to find the right slide for this. I figured this one did pretty well. So we spent the next 2 months, maybe 6 weeks, but 6 to 8 weeks, somewhere in that time frame, fixing production bugs, right? Things that we didn't quite catch in staging, features that we either purposely didn't bring along because of time, or we were gonna do it later, or we just missed. Now you had real customers hitting our site every day, calling our care team. Nobody from our care team is here. I wish they were. I would give them a big hug. It's not a giant care team. I think it was like 5 to 7 people. Their call volume went up, I think, a factor of like 5 to 6 times for a good solid month, maybe these 2 months. God bless each and every one of them for dealing with that. And then you also had, we have obviously our customer-facing site where people go and get cars. We have our internal tooling where operations people take care of cars, manage the fleet, et cetera, et cetera. That probably didn't get as much love during this transition as the consumer-facing site. So there was some issues, maybe more than one, on the operations side. So we spent the next 2 months cleaning everything up, and I think getting us to a place that we were very stable, right? And now I think so that's the past. That's how we got here and why. And now I can talk about some of the things that we learned prior, post doing all this, and some of the benefits, right? So some observations, right? I think the first one, looking back, through the process, a couple things from the actual transition I wanted to highlight. So, and kudos to Freedom here. One of the things that I learned watching us go through this, and obviously being one of the people holding the torches, if you're gonna make a decision like this, you gotta go all the way in. You can't just dip your toe in. Because if we had spent months, we'll do half of it in Java, and we'll do this other little bit in Ruby, and eventually we'll migrate everything over, we wouldn't be there today. We would probably have like 50, 60%, in Ruby. We would not have gone all the way in. So that is the one thing, the one most important thing I think I learned from this was go all in. And you can answer people's questions. Freedom let us email them questions about why we're doing this, and he sat down and addressed all those questions and said at the end, and we're moving to Ruby on Rails, right? So you go all in and you stay committed, especially when you're doing something like this, because it's important to get everybody on board. You're all marching towards the same goal, and you're not tearing in 2 different directions, because all that's going to do is slow you down, waste time, and we would not be where we are today, which is in a much better place. The other thing I noticed, so we had 0 people in our engineering team, minus Freedom, who had ever used Ruby on Rails. And so we told every engineer, now you're gonna learn Ruby on Rails. We know a lot of you guys are Java backend developers. That's great. Now you're gonna be Ruby on Rails developers. Which also means we had nobody that knew what they were particularly doing, right? We look, you could look things up online and you try to get an understanding for the best practices. But what we did was we brought in a consultant. Unfortunately, it was only for about 10 hours a week. And so we would throw about 8,000 questions at them in those 10 hours. And God help him, he tried to answer every one that he could. But he wasn't, he didn't have full context. He wasn't sitting there writing the code with us every day. So I think one thing that would have went a long way is if we could have brought somebody in who is sitting with us in those seats. That's not our conference room, thank God. In those seats, though, helping us build along the way. So they understood the context, they could understand, where we're heading and why, and kind of steer us in the right direction. I think that would have been, pretty beneficial for us. So those are some of the things, I noticed, again, along the way getting us there. Now that we're there, I think this is, the more, maybe more important thing now that you guys know the story, what happened, right? So back, in the Java days, what would happen is we would get a project, and obviously product's involved, and UX design is involved, and obviously engineering is involved. When we would get the project, not every time would all the requirements be fully scoped out, would all the design be fully scoped out, and it didn't particularly matter because it took us a pretty long time to do these features, to get through these projects. So they had time to would get us going. They would give us like the beginning requirements, the beginning design. We could start off and do our thing, and then they could kind of fill in the gaps as we went along. That doesn't happen anymore. And in fact, I think we caught a lot of people off guard when we switched to Ruby on Rails. We got through the fires, we put them all out, and we started doing new features. Side note, if you tell product not to do anything for like 4 months when you're building something else, they think of a lot of ideas. So there is no shortage of work from a feature standpoint. And so they had all these ideas and all these features, and they were kind of used to the old way, right? Where they could get those beginning requirements and let us kind of get going. Now I notice we were pinging them, pretty consistently to be like, okay, we're done. Like, can you hand us the next? We noticed these edge cases you didn't catch, or how do you want to handle this? Same thing with design. We would reach back and say, hey, we need the final design. It's not all here. Where they were not used to this because of how long it would take us before. We sped up a pretty significant factor, and I'll go into I'll show some numbers in a second. When you have 80 microservices. One of the things that happens is a team becomes responsible for these sets, these 5 to 10 services or whatever. And only that team, makes changes, right? And even if you go and make change to that code, they're gonna review your PR and sign off on it. And so if you get a project and you need to interface with, say, 3 or 4 of these other teams, you need now convince them, you know what you should be doing right now instead of all that other work you're doing? This project, because it's super cool and it's high priority. Not everybody agrees with that, so that slows things down. And then I think the knowledge transfer suffers as well, right? Because this is my little kingdom, my little fiefdom. I do this, you guys do your code, I do my code. And so that, we got rid of all that, right? The other thing when you have a system like this, I could not run Flexcar on my laptop, right? And again, Freedom said this to me in the beginning too, and I didn't really see the power of it as much. It very quickly we did. You would have pseudo services that kind of stood in the place of it. So when you did testing, you really weren't fully testing it because you really couldn't run the whole thing on your laptop. When we have a monolith Ruby on Rails app, you can, which is awesome. So the thing that really stood out though was, since we tore these little fiefdom, little kingdoms down, and now everybody can look at any part of the system and make changes. People know a lot more, right? They're less afraid. Let's say if a billing issue, if a billing issue comes up, it doesn't always have to be Dan. I know I've been pointing to him a lot. He's a very important part of our project and our team, but he was like Mr. Billing in the Java world. He's ironically still did a lot of billing in the Ruby world, but it doesn't always have to go to Dan. Anyone has the ability now to jump in there and take a look if there's a billing issue or they want to add a feature and they have to interface with it. That kind of gets spread out, right? So, when we, back in the Java world, we did, I went back and tried to get some rough numbers here. We were doing around 10 to 15, I would say projects, not like little features, but projects a quarter. Right, so 10 to 15 a quarter, and our engineering team was larger than it is in the Ruby on Rails days. We now do 25 to 30 projects in a quarter with a much smaller engineering team. Probably for people that have been in this Ruby on Rails system for a while, it's probably not shocking at all. For us, it was kind of shocking. We weren't expecting that kind of speed and that kind of improvement. So that part has been awesome. And one thing I would say, and it's not 100% correlation of you can point to this and say, this is because of Ruby on Rails. But I would say because of the speed, we can try out new features, right? So before, if product had an idea for something and they weren't quite sure if it was gonna work, now they're looking at the amount of time it takes to build that feature. And if it fails, the amount of time it takes to build, the follow-on feature, right? And you're talking months. And so there was definitely hesitation of like, should we try some of these things? Should we not? Now that we're in this Ruby on Rails, side of the game, we can try those things out really quickly. We're talking, weeks, maybe a really big thing, month and a half, but a lot of things we're doing is in the weeks, 2 to 3 week kind of camp. So now you can try both of those things in a month. The pressure is way down. And so we have been really trying things out with product and working, pretty closely with them to try to, move Flexcar in the right direction. And we have doubled membership growth just from last year when we shipped, here at RailsConf. Again, it's not a one-to-one, correlation, but I think it is a large part because of the speed and what we can deliver for products, so they can try things out and figure out what's working and really what's helping and focus in on that. So that's been amazing. Thank you. The team size is another, I think, really big thing, and I think this is kind of cool. So we were working in teams, 5 to 8, I would say, in the Java world. Nowadays, 2 to 3 is kind of our norm. And what that allows us to do, and again, because of that whole like fiefdom kingdom thing, you kind of did one thing and you stood there. Now what it allows us to do is we have 2 to 3 teams. We can swap people around, right? So if we want, more of our senior engineers to mentor, some more of our juniors, or just this person who knows this part of the system to work with this person to do that correlation, that cross-pollination, excuse me, very possible, right? And the small team size, again, has been not just from an engineering standpoint, I think from a product standpoint, we get to shift things around. So again, more product, more of design is interacting with more of engineering as a whole, which I think is great. We're not that big of a company. So to knock those walls down and have people actually, communicating and talking amongst each other and kind of meeting each other for the first time, even though they probably worked together for like 3 years, is kind of a special thing for Flexcar, not just for engineering. So, when we did this whole migration, we didn't just take, for the most part, if you look at some parts of our code base and you looked at it, you would go, that's Java code in Rails. But for the most part, we actually started over, right? We knew some of the warts and the things we had to get around in the Java world, and not because of Java, but because of what we were trying to build. So when we did this in Ruby on Rails, it was a great opportunity to rethink everything, right? How are we doing this? How are we approaching this? We know what the end result we want. We've been doing this now for a while. Let's redo it, and I'll get into this in a second. I'm a front end guy. I know who hiss, but so I'm in React pretty heavily, and even on the React side, it was we could have just grabbed what we had already built, plop it over, but even that we wanted to clean house and kind of restart and rethink how we're doing. So it was kind of all over the map. We were kind of just starting over and rethinking everything, and I think that alone cleared up some of the stuff we were trying to overcome with the changes and the pivots. You kind of start over again. Don't worry, we probably have a lot of those back again in the year since. Tech debt, as we all know, accumulates the second you hit the button. So we do have some cleanup to do, but for the most part, the code base is so much cleaner. The features we have work a lot better. We are putting out way less fires than we were before. Like I just mentioned, we kept our React front end. Me and Mr. Freedom might have had a conversation about how if we didn't keep our React front end, several of us, including myself, maybe would have left Flexcar. I don't know how much of that was reality versus joking, but Freedom gave us the opportunity and said, okay, prove to me it's going to work. We did. We kept our React front end for our consumer-facing applications. So our main website, and we use React Native for our mobile experience. So all that, but bottom line, that all works great with Rails, right? Like it's not like a tough thing, and the performance is solid. It's been, and in fact, no offense, Dan, our front end devs were the ones who became full stack, I think, the first, right? They figured out really quickly, like, oh, I don't have to wait around for all you back end guys to build this API that I need with the data. I can just do it. And so really our senior front end guys became truly full stack, I would say, before anyone else. And they're at this point leading the charge, being full stack and being able to do both. Now for our internal operations side, right? We were using initially, ERB, Turbo, Stimulus. That's what we kept. But we recently, in the last couple months, decided to, kind of bite the bullet, and we were going to use Inertia and React so we can run it on Rails. I hugged somebody in the audience because they built this awesome README or a blog post. Thanks to Evil Martians, Irina in the corner. Thank you. This blog post took us, from nothing to having Inertia up and running and working in our system in 20 minutes, right? Like no joke, 20 minutes. And no joke, I hugged the individual who wrote this blog post because he saved us so much time, and it was awesome, right? So please, follow Evil Martians. They do amazing stuff. But for us, the thing that we decided recently was, we're now asking people to be full stack. They have to know, Ruby on Rails. They have to know React, and they also have to learn, this kind of a different shift in thinking, when you do React versus, Turbo and Stimulus. If we could just do React everywhere, it kind of lowers the bar for us. We're a small group, and I think because we're all kind of learning it, none of us were really doing probably. If you looked at our code, you would probably want to hurt us or throw things at us because I'm sure we're not doing things correctly. So we're gonna get rid of that, and we're gonna focus on one front end framework, for Flexcar. So, sorry. So this kind of goes into that as well. Is we really wanted to put a kind of a focus. I think I wanted a lens for this picture. By the way, if you couldn't tell, all these slides have been from Midjourney. Awesome tool. It's been great. And I kind of think I wanted a lens, but after about like 20 minutes trying to get it to do that, this is the best I could do. So obviously it took on the internal tooling, and that was the words it picked up on to come to this slide. Sorry, not related to Ruby on Rails at all. Our main focus to this point, because we wanted people to, obviously, lease cars from us, right? Because if they don't do that, we don't make money, and we don't have a company. So our main focus for a long time was the external-facing site, and we had these internal tools for our operations people and our fleet people. But we didn't put a lot of attention to it until recently. And so because Flexcar is going to go into this expansion, and again, we are set up for success here. We can scale this thing. There's no issues of is Flexcar going to not be performant because of we're on Ruby on Rails. There's none of that, obviously. And the focus is now how do we better support our operations folks. And the people in the field, actually, getting these cars into our customers' hands. And again, this is kind of, I think, why, we want to do this whole, shift to Inertia and React. We could reuse the components we can already built for our customer-facing site and make some very nice-looking and easy-to-use internal tools. I'm not saying you can't do that with Turbo and Stimulus. I'm saying we probably can't do that because of our lack of knowledge. And it's much easier for us to do that with React. So our focus going forward is going to be how can we support the The operations folks, obviously we're not just going to leave the customer behind. We're going to, but we're doing more for the operations side as we start to scale, and that becomes more important for Flexcar. So obviously during this whole transition and then post when we launched, obviously Ruby was talked about amongst engineering. The thing that caught me off guard is I remember I was getting coffee or something, and the COO comes up to me and he's like, "Oh, how about that Ruby?" And I was like, "What?" And he was like, "Yeah, it's obviously Freedom has been talking to him about it, but he people in the boardroom, people in different departments knew that engineering switched to Ruby, and they were saying it in like a positive way. They weren't downplaying it, and so it actually got talked about in places you didn't expect, like getting coffee with the COO. And to me, that I think is a great thing. People are aware that the change in engineering and our speed and our how we're doing things and our efficiency is thanks to Ruby on Rails, right? It's not just some black box thing and engineers do their thing and blah blah blah. Like everybody in the company is now kind of a part of this, if they wanted to be or not, but they are, and they see the value, and it's the heart's up there. Maybe I'm pushing it, but it's talked about very positively at Flexcar, and obviously very supportive of what we're doing and going ahead. Yeah. So when we started out last year, again, none of us knew Ruby on Rails. My most experienced dev, again, Mr. Dan Dunker's in the corner, is a year and 3-4 months into his Ruby on Rails journey. So we were relying very heavily on AI when we were going through this journey last year. And what we were using was ChatGPT, and it's fine. And so what would happen is, it would hallucinate. We definitely saw that. But the problem is, like nowadays, if it did it, you're like, you're talking nonsense. At the time, you don't know what you don't know, right? And so we didn't know that it was sending us bad things. So we would waste an hour going down this path and like, why won't this thing run? So really quick note, the best thing ever was one of my senior devs sent me his chat with ChatGPT. And it was like, hey, the original author of this code missed a few things. And, and he's like, that's you. You're the original author of this code. You're yelling at yourself. And it was like, oh, my apologies. And so it was helpful in some regards. We did Copilot, for a while, and that helped, a little bit. But the real big game changer for us, and probably not surprising, is this year we started using Cursor, maybe soon to be Claude Code. But for right now, we're just trying to get people to use Cursor. And the change has been night and day, right? Obviously, I don't need to explain why for everybody here, but the context thing has been, stellar. I think if we had Cursor last year when we were doing the migration, wherever Freedom is, I don't know where he is, we might have been able to hit the 3 months. I think if we had Cursor or Claude Code last year, it is really been that beneficial for us, as we're doing things. Takes away a lot of the boilerplate. So again, I mentioned before, I'm a front end guy, right? I ignored this. I mean, I was doing the React side of this whole Ruby on Rails thing. I ignored the Rails side for a very long time until I think I sent Freedom one of my PRs for like a migration. I was very proud of myself. It was probably to like add one column or something. But now, because of Cursor, Dan's probably in his seat chuckling. Because of Cursor, I've started getting into actually writing Rails side, right? So I've done a few PRs, probably not great, but hey, I'm learning. And I think for me the great thing is I can ask it to explain certain things to me, so to use that kind of rubber duck thing too, of like if I have an idea and I'm trying to talk through it, I can talk to Cursor, as sad as that sounds, and it really kind of helps me kind of get an idea of, am I going down the right path or am I not? But it's really, for me, kind of, unlocked the ability for me to jump in there and not feel like I don't know what I'm doing, even though I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm learning, I am getting better. And I think what I have noticed is, Cursor in the beginning for us, it could write pretty much production ready React code pretty easily. It probably because it's been trained a ton on React. It struggled a little bit more for Ruby on Rails, it's getting better, and I think we're adding certain rules to it, and people have been great in the community. Be like, hey, this has been working for me. They put things up. You can take them, put it into your rule set to get your code to be in a much better place than it was. So for us, I think AI obviously is going to continue. We're just kind of getting started with it. I'm really excited to where's it going to take us. The speed improvements. That part's great. On the other hand, I don't think I'm afraid of anyone losing our job at Flexcar because of AI. We kind of put those fears to rest. But it really has kind of pushed us to get further ahead. Definitely gets rid of a lot of the boilerplate stuff. Helps us, all of us, from seniors down to juniors. PR reviews, tests, by the way. Although, I'll talk about that quick. We chose mini test. Yeah, I know. Which is cool. I do want to move to RSpec at some point, only for me because it looks like Jest, or at least to me it feels like Jest, from React. But Cursor every once in a while, even though we have multiple rules, do not write tests in RSpec. It's better because we have literally probably 3 rules for it now. But every once in a while it's here's your test in RSpec. Not very helpful. But we are very happy where we are in this whole AI journey, and we have miles and miles to go. But it's been great for us. So I think I kind of alluded to this before. So our engineering team in the whole Java world was much bigger, right? And where we are now as an engineering team, we are much smaller. And I think when you have a smaller team, there are certain things you need to pay attention to, like career growth and making sure our junior devs and mid-level devs get the experience, the exposure, to move up in their career. And I think one of the cool things here, everybody obviously had no choice, jumped headfirst into this whole Ruby on Rails journey we did. Right or wrong, I think our junior devs jumped the hardest. I don't know if you can jump harder, but they dove maybe faster into the deep end. Kind of no fear, and it's really kind of let them. I think we put a lot of pressure and maybe responsibility on our junior devs than maybe we should, but they do great. And I think it's part of that though is because of Ruby on Rails, where we have a little bit more, I think, leeway. There's it's opinionated. So there are certain things just they're not going to be able to do. Between that and I think some of the AI stuff, it really kind of unlocks their growth and our growth as an engineering team. And I think I'm sure it wasn't just Java alone. I'm not trying to make fun of Java, but it was definitely how we were using Java and Flexcar before, where I think it was a much more tougher journey, I think, as an engineer along your career path to get the experience, to get the exposure, versus now, it's with a small team with Ruby on Rails, you're getting exposed to quite a lot. So not everything along this journey has been, unicorns and rainbows, right? You should have seen the mid-journey pictures for that one. So this is the best I came up with. And so we did struggle with some things, along the way. Oops, my water. So yeah, obviously the RSpec mini test we already talked about. Some of the things that I think caught us, we had to play some catch up on, jobs, right? Having jobs run. I think we were also multiple versions behind. We were in solid queue, and so that wasn't helping anybody. But we had to, start to understand how do we, take care of all these jobs, priority, figuring things out, kind of, along the way, and without knowing we were doing it wrong to begin with. And so we would kind of figure that out when things started failing at 3 in the morning, which is super fun. The one thing, because I kind of asked the team, hey, I'm doing this presentation, what are some things you want me to highlight for the stuff we struggled with? Pretty much every single dev was like, it's really easy to write n+1 queries. highlight that a lot, and that's true. I think, so we use Sentry. If anyone from Sentry's here, yay. We're using Sentry, and Sentry's been great because it calls those out for us after they're in production. Because that's not on Sentry, that's on us for how our staging environment is right now. We're gonna fix that, I promise. That I think is, thankfully, I would say even with the N+1 queries, even with our Java-esque Rails code, we are still pretty performant, right? And again, I'm sure if a lot of you looked at our code base, there would probably be parts that, again, you would want to hurt us. Saying all that, I think the really cool thing for us though has been we haven't faced that like performance penalty of like, oh, you guys are a bunch of knuckleheads and now your stuff's really slow. It just kind of handled it, moved on, and done great. So yeah, we do have N+1 queries. We do try to clean them up. Probably similar along the line is using scopes. We don't use them as much as we should, I think. And so we try to build these things in memory without realizing it. And then, trying to get everybody to kind of learn that along the way. Again, you find out when it's in production, which is super cool. But again, our site still runs, so, not that horrific. Authentication, I think, we're using Devise. I'm not saying Devise was hard for us to learn. It was maybe you guys will point at me and say, we told you so. But when we had our React separate, code repo in React, trying to authenticate it against, our Rails repo, Rails backend, there were some challenges, I'll say. There's literally some parts of that code base that says, do not change. I don't know why this works. We'll figure it out later. But so we don't change it, and it's fine, and it's great. Man, everyone says when you do one of these, you talk way faster. It's very true. I just looked at the time. I was like, oh boy. All right. So the good news is I have a few. You can tell me too if you need me to wrap this up anytime to get back that time. I will not be offended for any of these. So. What do we go from here, right? So now we're going to look at like the future, right? Where are we going? So now that we're here, we have this Ruby on Rails thing. We kind of have our front end, back end kind of sorted. What do we focus on, right? And that's not to say we don't have any things to clean up on like N+1s, but the really cool thing is this lets us start to think about like where do we want Flexcar to go. Right? Not just like Flexcar engineering, but like what things do we want to unlock for Flexcar? And really we can start to architect those things, work more with product. We're not spending as much time, putting out fires because, something blew up at like 2 a.m. or something like that. That part alone has been great. It's not like we had a ton of those. I'm not trying to make it sound like Flexcar was on fire all the time in the Java world, but we definitely had more of those kind of production issues. I'm not trying to jinx anything, so I'm actually not going to say anything out loud about how we haven't had that for a while now. But when you get through all that, and we don't have to worry about those kind of things, you can really start to focus on like the next layer, the next level, right? And for us, it's really this kind of like where do we want to architect, Flexcar. Obviously, engineering is going to take us there along with product, but how do we want Flexcar in a year to look? How do we want Flexcar in 3 years to look? We know how we can get there, right? We don't have to worry about like, but we can't, I got to write like 5 more services or, we're not going to have the performance to get, we don't have to worry about any of that. And again, I know it makes sense, but yeah, I think for half a second up there, you guys saw my cursor window. Like, I'm running Flexcar on my laptop. It's super cool. Again, I know that probably sounds weird for everyone that's been using Ruby on Rails, but coming from that 80 microservice world to this, game changing. Indiana Jones, for anyone who doesn't get the reference, we do have tech debt, and it does pile up quicker because I'm sure people are thinking, you guys have only been out for like a year. How much tech debt could you have? A lot. Not crazy amounts. I'm not trying to make it sound horrible, but we do have things we need to clean up. And kind of, along the way, refactor, especially that Java code that we have laying around that's in Rails. And lastly, we just want to keep learning, right? So see, where this whole Ruby on Rails journey is going to take us. Actually, wait, I have one more, only because I want to use it because it's Ruby on Rails. That's not me. That's Midjourney. Can't yell at me.